Chapter 18. 8 months later, Scarlet and Rhett's child was born. She was a girl, and she was named Eugenie Victoria, after the British Queen. Scarlet was relieved to see that she was an absolutely beautiful baby. She had Scarlet's black hair and large blue eyes like her father. What amazed Scarlet most, however, was Rhett's reaction to becoming a father. Scarlet had never seen a man act so ridiculous. Rhett talked about nothing else but his new daughter, how pretty she was, how sweet and quiet, and how she was the best baby in the world.
"Just look at her,"
Rhett said a week after the baby's birth.
"Have you ever seen a more beautiful baby? You're going to be the most beautiful girl in Atlanta and have everything you want. And everyone is going to love you. And when it's time for you to get married, well, Daddy will find you the best husband in the world."
Scarlet said, "Well, Rhett, doesn't her mother get any praise? She's my child, too, after all. You certainly are acting ridiculous."
"Ridiculous? She's the only person who has ever completely belonged to me, and nothing is going to be too good for her."
"Well, Rhett, I'm your wife, aren't I? I belong to you," said Scarlet. Rhett gave her a strange look and said nothing. Melanie admired the baby as much as Rhett did and visited almost every day. Scarlet thought that Melanie looked as if she would break if you touched her. She was so tiny and thin. "Aren't Eugenie's eyes blue, Rhett?" Melanie said one day while Rhett was holding the baby. "I think they're going to be pea green when she's older, almost like mine," said Scarlet. "Oh, no, I think they're going to be blue as the bonny blue flag," said Melanie, kissing the baby.
"That's it. We'll call her Bonnie. Eugenie is such a formal name, don't you think?"
said Rhett. "Bonnie Blue Butler," said Melanie, and everyone laughed. Little Bonnie seemed to agree with her name because she smiled at her father. Rhett took Bonnie everywhere with him. Although the ladies of Atlanta still did not think Rhett was a good, respectable man, they had to admit it was very charming to see a man so interested in his daughter. Men weren't often seen with babies, and every woman knew that men really liked sons the best. But Rhett said that he preferred girls.
"Except for Wade Hamilton. He's my favorite boy,"
Rhett would say, patting Wade on the shoulder. Rhett wanted to make sure that Wade knew he was still loved, although he had 2 younger sisters that needed a lot of attention. Mammy decided that Mr. Rhett was a fine, respectable gentleman after all, when she saw how good he was with the children, especially Bonnie. Besides, Rhett was always saying that Mammy was the real leader of the house, and constantly asked her opinion on childcare. Mammy certainly liked that. As time passed, Rhett became very concerned with his daughter's social opportunities.
"Even if her father isn't accepted in Atlanta, Bonnie is going to have every opportunity in the world. There's not going to be anywhere she can't go. If this means I have to charm all those old lady friends of Aunt Pittypat's, I'll do it. If I have to make friends with the Northerners, I'll do that too. And Scarlet, you're not going to go to that factory of yours any more. I admire your determination, but leave the work to Archie and Ashley. I won't have Bonnie's mother running around town for a factory. Bonnie isn't going to suffer for her parents' mistakes."
"Rhett, I have never seen a man act this way about a baby," Scarlet said. But she agreed to spend less time at the factory. She did not really enjoy the work, although she did miss seeing Ashley. Many months went by, and Bonnie was quickly growing into a beautiful little girl. She walked and talked very well. She was cheerful, and Rhett could not stop talking about how smart she was. Scarlet felt almost jealous of her daughter, for Rhett spent so much time with her. And, although Bonnie loved her mother, Rhett was clearly her favorite. She would not allow anyone else to put her to bed at night. Scarlet was concerned that Rhett would ruin Bonnie's good character, for he gave her anything she wanted. But Rhett did not pay any attention to Scarlet's scolding. The next few years passed quickly and quietly. Scarlet and Rhett raised the children, and Scarlet continued to work at the factory. Bonnie and Rhett went everywhere together, and Scarlet was surprised to see that Rhett was really trying to make himself popular with the people of Atlanta for Bonnie's future. And it was working. Rhett told all Aunt Pitty Pat's friends that he was truly sorry for all the things he had said and done over the years. This wasn't true, of course, but Rhett was such a good actor that the ladies of Atlanta believed him. Soon, Rhett and Scarlet's house was filled with visitors. One day, when Bonnie was 4 years old, Scarlet went to the factory in an especially good mood. It was Ashley's birthday, and Melanie was giving him a surprise birthday party. Scarlet was wearing a new hat, and the day was beautiful. She was smiling as she walked up the steps to the factory office. Inside, Ashley was sitting at the desk working on some accounts. Scarlet stood at the door and noticed that Ashley's blonde hair was turning gray. "And he's only 27 years old," thought Scarlet. She had not spoken to Ashley alone in so long. Was he happy? Suddenly, Ashley turned around and saw Scarlet watching him.
"Hello, Scarlet,"
he said, smiling at her.
"Are you here to see the latest mistakes I've been making?"
"Oh, Ashley, I think when I have a new hat on, all the numbers I ever knew fly right out of my head," Scarlet said, and laughed. Ashley laughed with her.
"Are you here to distract me for a while so that Melanie has time to prepare for my birthday party?"
"Ashley, how did you know about the party? It was supposed to be a surprise," Scarlet cried. Ashley smiled.
"Well, Melanie isn't very good at hiding her excitement about things like this, so I guess the truth."
They sat down by the window and did not say anything for a while. Scarlet thought to herself how comfortable she felt, sitting there with this man who had known her for years. After a while, Ashley said,
"I swear, Scarlet, you get prettier every day. You still look like that young girl at 12 Oaks the day of the barbecue when you were 16. And I'm getting old and gray-haired."
"Oh, Ashley, you're not old. You still have lots and lots of years left. And people in your family are gray-haired early, aren't they?"
"Yes, they are. Of course, there are so few of my family left here now,"
said Ashley softly. Scarlet knew what he was thinking. He was thinking of the days of his youth and of the old South before the war. She suddenly felt incredibly sad. Their lives were so different now. "Oh, Ashley, don't look back. Don't look back into the past before the war. It's hard, isn't it? If you remember the past too much, soon you can't do anything else."
"Why, Scarlet, that's the most beautiful thing I have ever heard you say, and the truest thing. You are right,"
said Ashley. He put his arm around her, and Scarlet leaned her head against his shoulder. They stood there like that for a few moments. Scarlet was surprised to realize that she did not feel as if she and Ashley were being romantic. She only felt as if they were warm friends who understood one another. Suddenly, she saw Ashley's face change, and he moved away from her. She looked at the office door and saw India Wilkes, Ashley's sister, and Rhett staring at them. India looked as if she was thinking, "There, I've caught the two of you." Rhett had a look on his face that Scarlet could not understand. He turned and walked away. Mammy came up the stairs and knocked on the door to Rhett and Scarlet's room. "Miss Scarlet, I brought your dress for the party tonight." "Mammy, tell Rhett that I'm not going. I have a headache," said Scarlet from inside the room. She was lying in her bed, feeling deeply afraid. What would India say to everyone, and especially to Melanie? What would Melanie think? Somehow, Scarlet could not stand the thought of Melanie thinking badly of her. She still thought Melanie was ridiculous and silly, but as she lay there in the bed, Scarlet thought that she would rather cut off her own arm than have Melanie be hurt. Suddenly, there was a quick knock on the door, and Rhett came into the room.
"Get up out of that bed, Mrs. Butler,"
he said.
"You're going to that party, and you're going to face all the people there. It's only what you deserve, Scarlet."
"Rhett, I have a headache.
"Nonsense. You're a coward, Scarlet. You and Ashley are both cowards. You're going over to the Wilkes house if I have to drag you. You can't deny Melanie the pleasure of ordering you out of her house. You've wanted Ashley for years, Scarlet, and you have to face the consequences of your actions."
Scarlet was furious. For once, Rhett really didn't understand. "Rhett, it wasn't like that at all. If you would only give me a chance, I could explain everything."
"My dear, I understand perfectly. Now, here's your dress. I will come and get you in 10 minutes,
said Rhett, and left the room. When Rhett and Scarlet arrived at the Wilkes house, Rhett opened the door of the carriage and said quietly,
"Good night, Scarlet."
"You mean you're not coming in with me?" said Scarlet. She was afraid. Oh, what would everyone say when they saw her? She knew India. India hated her. She would have told everyone.
"No, Scarlet. You are going to have to face them alone,"
said Rhett, but he no longer sounded angry. Scarlet walked up the steps of the house and knocked at the door. She was shaking. Oh, to see the angry look on Melanie's face! The door opened and Scarlet stepped into the room. When the people at the party saw Scarlet, they immediately stopped talking. Scarlet turned red, so they knew. Suddenly, Melanie stepped forward. "Scarlet, darling, I'm so happy you could come," she said in a loud voice. "Would you be a dear and help me greet my guests? India wasn't able to come tonight, and I would love your company," she said gently. Scarlet was stunned. Had India not told Melanie what had happened? Why was Melanie being so kind to her? As Melanie took Scarlet's arm, there was a very firm expression on her face as she took Scarlet's arm. As they began to greet the guests, Melanie looked as if she was daring anyone to be rude to Scarlet. Slowly, the guests realized that Melanie had no intention of making Scarlet leave. They greeted Scarlet with "Good evening" in cold voices and tried to enjoy the party. When Scarlet returned to her own house, she entered quietly, hoping Rhett wouldn't hear her. She was exhausted, and she wanted time to think about what had happened alone. But as she passed the dining room, she heard Rhett call out to her.
"Good evening, Mrs. Butler. Come in here for a moment."
Scarlet entered the dining room. Rhett was sitting there with a glass in front of him and an almost empty bottle of liquor on the table. Although he sat up straight, Scarlet knew that he was very, very drunk. "What is it? You're drunk. I can see that. I'm tired, and I want to go to bed," said Scarlet.
"You're right, my dear. I am very drunk. And I can see that you need a drink too. Yes, don't look at me as if I were crazy. I'm not a fool. I know you drink, and I know how much you drink. So here is a glass. I am sure you need some liquor after the evening you've just had."
"Don't be ridiculous. I'm not drinking that. I'm not going to talk to you when you're acting like this. Tonight was awful," Scarlet said angrily.
"I know that it was."
Said Rhett. He got up and closed the door to the dining room.
"So, what happened, Scarlet? I can see from your face that you're wondering many things. I think I can answer some of the questions in your head. You're wondering why Melanie didn't order you out of her house. Don't think it's because India didn't tell her everything she suspects about you and Ashley. Melanie knows, but she didn't believe anything India told her. She accused India of lying to her and being jealous of you, and India is jealous of you. I know that much. Melanie isn't able to believe that anyone she loves could be dishonorable, and she loves you. I don't know why, since you've wanted to take her husband away from her for years."
"You're drunk and awful. I'm not going to say this again. It wasn't like that. If you would just let me explain," said Scarlet. Rhett suddenly grabbed her.
"My dear, I could crush you like a little bird in my hands, and I would, if I thought that it would make all the thoughts of Ashley Wilkes leave your head."
Scarlet's green eyes sparkled with anger. "Rhett Butler, you take your hands off me," she hissed like a snake. Rhett let go of her.
"You have always had an admirable spirit, my dear,"
he said more calmly.
"Anyway, I have come to tell you that I am leaving tomorrow. I'm taking Bonnie with me on a long trip, and I don't know when we'll be back."
"Are you crazy, Rhett Butler? I'm not letting you take my child on a trip alone. You'll probably let her spend time with people like that Belle Watling you were friends with. You don't know the first thing about nice, proper people," she said. Scarlet saw that she had made a mistake in saying this. She had never seen Rhett give her such an angry look.
"You stupid fool,"
he said coldly.
"I'm a much better parent to Bonnie than you are. Who are you to tell me about nice, proper people after what you did today? And how dare you suggest that I would ever let Bonnie spend time with anyone like Belle Watling? Do you think I want her chances to be ruined?"
he said. He turned and left the room. Scarlet did not see the sadness and pain in his eyes, and even if she had, she would not have understood.